Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first official show of the Jers Way PGA DFS show. I'm excited to do it. Let me get cooking here just in a second so I can do all the good things we need to do to social media. There we go. Excellent. Great to have you. I think there's two times to be in the PGA DFS. It's the early season of the fall swing because you have people kind of distracted by football. There's a lot of unknowns. There's also an excellent time to get into PGA DFS, and that's when football season ends because, again, there's people coming in who maybe haven't followed the season as well. You can identify more groupthink. And speaking of groupthink, we have a lot of that this week. And that tends to happen anytime that there's a lot of unknowns. So there's unknowns this week. Some golfers have coming in off a little bit of a layoff. We have some Corn Ferry guys who have graduated. We've had some guys, we just haven't seen before. So there's a lot of unknowns. And when that happens, it's easy to get into groupthink. And with DFS specifically, we want to take advantage of that. So I'm super excited. I appreciate Jers, rocking Jers right here on the other side. My camera is showing things backwards, but I appreciate you having me here on this Wednesday evening. Talk about the Fortnite championship. Fortinet, I guess. Who knows? I don't care. But let's get into it. Excited. Hopefully Wednesday's treating you well. Hopefully you're finding yourself in a good place tonight. Let's make some money. Again, this early season opportunity, or it gives us an opportunity to do that. So thankful to be here with you guys. And please show type your questions. Let me make sure they can work. So there you go. Yeah, type your questions if you have any. Love it being collaborative. I love being a collaborative show. I mean, you all are experts. You're good at what you do. I think everybody has their niches, which just makes it fun. So let's bounce some ideas off each other. But let's just kind of dive in. And so we got the news this week that not today actually, that Jon Rahm is battling a stomach bug. Man, I wish that news came out tomorrow because I faded Jon Rahm. I mentioned that on Twitter today, and nothing against Jon Rahm. He's the number one ranked player in the world. He's on fire, almost won every single playoff event. Should have been player of the year in my opinion, kind of won the US Open. But anyway, maybe should have won the Open too. But anyway, so I'm fading him just from a DFS strategy. If this is your first time, maybe you're checking in on the Jersey Twitter page and you haven't really followed, or you have me or anybody else that's talking about DFS strategy. This is new to you. DFS is very different than the betting PGA outright market, or your betting skills are very different than your skills needed to do well in DFS. It's still important, but again, we're playing against not so much a book or the house. We're playing against other people just like us. So we have to identify what other people are thinking. That's just kind of the game theory aspect, and find ways on a consistent way to gain leverage over the field, the people we're playing against. And maybe that works well one week, maybe it doesn't. But if that process holds, that leads to long-term success in DFS. And DFS can be tricky because I've seen some people who are amazing at betting outright, but that same strategy doesn't come. And I've seen people do great at DFS, but not so great at betting outright. So we kind of want to adjust our strategy there. And I think this show will help if you follow my DFS Monday Night School. Hopefully you took some things from that, and we had some great guests. So anyway, let's dive back in and talk about Jon Rahm. Again, wish the information came out about the stomach bug tomorrow because I faded him. And here's the reason why I think you just have to fade at 12-1 for a salary is just insane. That's incredibly high outside the playoff at the Tour Championship. But when he's 40% owned, I'm looking at FanShare right now that actually has him down a little bit to about 25, which is a little lower than it was earlier. So if that's kind of surprising, that might be because of the stomach bug. But I tell you what now, you monitor this ownership, especially with FanShare, because if he's getting below 20, he's not there yet, not really that close. But if he gets below 20, that might be an okay time to divide it on Jon Rahm. I have a lot of single entry, 3-entry max this week. I predict he'd be more like 40% owned in those contests, but maybe the large field GPPs. Let's take a look at that ownership throughout tonight and see if it drops. Because if it does, we may want to rethink things because we might get Will Zalatoris passing him, who's kind of one of the highest owned guys. But I faded Rahm for a number of reasons. More, it's the game theory aspect. you cannot make money long term kind of playing a high salary guy like that who's going to be super high owned in DFS. There's good chalk and bad chalk, and we want to identify that, and we're going to play what we think might be good chalk sometimes week to week, and that's okay. We need that good chalk, and it's important to how to build our roster based on that good chalk. But there's also bad chalk. And a little bit of what, I talk about models and things like that is basically some information just on strokes gain data that we incorporate, and, trend as well. Not so much trending about, Fanshare has great information about how someone's trending with the ownership, but I really like trending with the ball striking. So not so much with the results, just trending with the ball striking. And Braum, was doing fine, doing great, but more of his long term, and I say long term in the last 36 rounds, he's just doesn't have the stats I would want a high-owned, high-salary guy to have. The stats needed here. So that's, some with wedges. So I'll give you an example. One of the most important stats this week is proximity between 100 and 125. Almost 18% of approach shots this week come from that range, 100 to 125 M. And Jon Rahm ranks 67th in the field, so a little better than midway through there. Ranks 97th and 137th with some of these other wedges that could be used as well. And just to come back, the tour average of proximity from 100 to 125 that on a normal tournament event with some other course, let's just say, Quail Hollow, the average tournament tour event, that's 11%, and we get almost 18%. And so that's a pretty big discrepancy. And 18% is a lot of approach shots this week going to come from that range. So it's going to be important. And Rahm, that's not his strength. He's great off the tee. He's great driving distance. He's good with the long irons and mid irons, but the wedges aren't so much his thing, or they haven't been in the last 36 rounds. So it just says, that might be a fade, that considering that plus ownership plus salary, it's just a fade for me because he's hard to fit in. But if you like, I'm not going to talk you off, Ron, because gosh, he's the number one ranked player in the world. I'm not going to talk you off of him. But we'll go down. Matsuyama is pretty interesting. Nobody's talking about him. Fanshare has him at 10%, which is kind of wild. Webb, if you follow me, I love Webb. He has kind of some short term, so some trend going his way. He has those long term stats that. Pretty good with the wedges. Really like him. He's projected under 20% right now. And maybe again, I should probably say why ownership is so important. So let's just say Rahm in a single entry contest is going to be 40% owned. What leverage do you get? So when you against the field, against your competitors, that means 40% or close to it of the people that are in your tournament are going to be rostering Jon Rahm. So that means the 5 other golfers have to be, more right. You're going to have to differentiate yourself even more, but it gets harder because if you're having a guy like, Mito, who might be 25%, then you're going to have lineups similar to other people that are not differentiate. And so when you're in GPPs, cash, throw this out the window. When you're GPPs, your goal has to finish in the top 1% of the tournament, each time to be consistent in DFS. If you're just hovering around the cash line each week in these large field tournaments, you might be kind of cashing more than, some of the pros, but the pros are almost always going to be more in that 1%. And so we think, okay, ownership helps us identify where we can get leverage. And so we might, be wrong one week, thinking one guy's bad chalk, one guy's good chalk. But the overall strategy, I say it all the time, process over content. Content is the tournament results week to week. So have your process over that. Your process is way more important because if you stick to that, you're more likely going to finish the 1% in the GPPs. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I love talking about it. Maybe too much. But anyway, we love Webb. Going into Zalatoris, who is kind of highly owned too. And I think people are betting him or rostering him, because of his ownership. Excuse me, not because of his ownership, because of his upside. He's projected almost 22% right now. He has upside. We've seen it. We've seen it at the Masters. But this isn't a type of course I would identify Willie Z playing well. It's going to be a little bit of a putt off. He is not a great putter. He's not great with wedges. From that very important statistic of 100 to 125, again, 18% of approach shots, are going to come from there. Willie Z ranks 132. That's near the bottom of the field in the last 36 rounds. I don't want that from a 10-5 guy who's going to be 25%. No way. And I want Willie Z on long, tight golf courses because he can drive it long and he can drive it straight pretty much. And I want Willie Z in kind of, when there's long approaches too. And difficult golf courses, this just doesn't seem like a Willie Z course. Can he win? Yeah, he's super talented. Any of these guys can win. But we're going to identify if they simulate this tournament, like if we live in a simulation and they simulate this tournament 100 times, I'd say Willie Z can win, let's just say 15 of those times. But maybe more often than he should, he might miss the cut. And so, sure, we might land on this week being one out of the 15 out of the 100 that he wins, and that's just PGA. That happens sometimes. But for a guy 10-5, I'm just going to rationalize it like someone with his price and his ownership should be able to win in a simulation more like 35 times. And so that's just kind of how I think. So he's not a play with me. Again, he could win, but I'm focusing on process over content. Then everybody loves He's kind of Cinderella this week. He's the girl you want to take to the prom. Hard to knock it if he putts like he did the last couple and has a solid approach game. He's going to be up there. Tringali, it's easy to kind of like him too. He fits out here on the West Coast, good putting surface. He's great with those wedges. Those are great. I'm not going to spend too much time on Tringali. He's a great play. Outside of that, and this is unquantifiable, but I feel like he may have just peaked a little bit early, kind of in or midway point of last year. I don't know if he's a 9-7 caliber golfer. Leishman too at 9-5. I think his course history, he had a top 5 or top 10 here within the last couple years. You might want to look at Leishman if you're a game theory guy. So this is where game theory really comes in because not much separates a Tringali, a Leishman, a Siwoo, Sebastian, Munoz, or Varner. Not a lot separates those guys in the 9K range. And so if the line between those are very thin, why not go the game theory route just to get the leverage? Because you want to win the GPP. So can kind of consider that. But I feel like these guys are going to go really low owned. Tringali at 7, Mark at 6, Siwoo at 10. The reason for that is they're hard to fit in lineups. A lot of people are going to start their lineups with Rahm or Webb or Willie Z or Kevin Na. Then it's really hard to fit in those guys right below them. And if we're knowing that, if I'm doing the Drive the Green this week tournament, the $5 mass entry, I might say, okay, because people are going to majority start their lineups with what I just mentioned, maybe I start my lineups within the Tringali, the Leishman, or the Siwoo to gain that leverage because no one else is doing it. And so that's an idea too. And so their line, if there's no one you're actually in love with in that range, then play the game theory route. That's how you finish in the 1% of the GPPs and make, a huge score. Yes, I had three scores this early in the past year that just made my year. Or that, I guess that was in 2020. So 2 years, it just made the year. And so that's what a GPP can do. You take down 50K, 75 or 100, you're set and you hope for more, but you finish the 1% sometime one time and you're good. And a lot of, GPP pros will tell you that too. They might not finish in the cash line for 12 straight weeks, but the process over content. And on that week 13, they win 100K and, they're good. And then maybe, 6 months later, they win 75. And, that's kind of how it works. So there's a lot of swings with it, but that's what we have to think of kind of with GPP. You're coming down to Varner. A lot of these guys are getting touted. There's so many sharp people out there. I'm not going to just, beat the dead horse, but I do like Varner, Champ as well. I'm going to go down to 2 guys I just really wanted to talk about, and that's Charlie Hoffman. Going to be popular. Let's see what Fanshare has with Chuck there. At 17%, kind of surprising. I thought it would have been a little bit more. But hey, I'll actually take 17% on Charlie Hoffman, and I'm saying he's good chalk for a couple of reasons. The first reason being he ranks number 1 in my model. So my model is considering strokes gained approach, somewhat driving distance, somewhat off the tee, the proximity with the wedges that I talked about, and a little bit of strokes gained par 5. Par 5s are important here, and just Hoffman lights it up across the board. So he's first overall in the model. He's 7th in approach. From those wedges, that very important stat, he ranks 7th from closer in with the wedges. So it's like maybe 60 degrees, 10th. with the pitching wedge. Likely he's 25th. So yeah, I really like Hoffman, and he's kind of trended. He finished the season nice last week, and yeah, he just seems like a West Coast dude. Got that flat bill. He's got kind of the liver spotted hands. He probably likes wine. Hoffman, riding with him hot. And the guy right below him is getting a lot of love. I think his ownership, it will be creeping up on FanShare maybe this evening for the last update, and that's Max Homa. So I love Max, super talented. He's the most talented golfer in the 8K and the 9K range. So both range. So if you can play him solely on upside, sure. I'm not going to haunt you for that, but I think he is going to be a little popular. And so with that popular, and also he's not a good fit. So it's a fade for me with the combination of two. He's not a good fit with the course. I like Max Homa on difficult golf courses like Quail Hollow, like Riv. I don't think he's a birdie maker, and the stats kind of back that up. But he's not great. Max can actually smoke it off the tee, so he's got the driving distance, and he's okay with this proximity with one of the wedges, but he's almost 103rd with, I'm going to say, his pitching wedge. That's 125 to 150, depending where they are. That could be like a 56. But anyway, it just doesn't feel like a Max Homa course. But I'm not going to talk you out of it, especially if he is under 15% and he does have that upside. He's just not in my he's just not in my pool. I think he's going to go too popular. He's being talked about too much, and this isn't a Max Homa course. Obviously, I'm wrong again, and may be wrong. He could, let's say if Max Homa wins, 20% of the time, and we get a Max Homa week just out of that 100 simulation, maybe it happens. But there's just very little leverage because I think he's going to be more owned and he's going to trend up. We may see tonight on the final ownership projections. McNeely's talked a lot about right now. Don't like McNeely coming down. Like Brendan Todd is actually interesting, and a guy that is not getting a lot of love because people think, hey, Brendan Todd is a guy that we need him on accurate golf courses because he just hits it straight. And sure, that there's some truth to that, but he does hit it well with his wedges. And right now, FanShare has him at 3%. So just throwing Brendan Todd out 3%. Brant Snedeker too. I kind of like him. He's projected 5 right now. But really the most surprising, and it's likely because he's coming from the Korn Ferry, but it's Steven Yeager, and he's at 6%. Talk about a guy with upside. You think Mito has upside? This guy, Yeager, might have a little bit more upside than Mito. So coming to Mito, he's 25% owned right now. So you must conceptualize something really, really well to kind of fall in love with Mito, because there's too many question marks. He hasn't played in a while because obviously he wasn't in the playoffs. He's I don't know how old he is, but he's young comparative. This will be his first full season on tour. And in the rounds that we do have, we only have 22 rounds to base some of the statistic off with Mito, and that could be good or bad. But he's middle of the road with the wedges. He's middle of the road with the approach. He's middle of the road in my overall model. He's just middle of the road. And maybe that's why he's priced at right at 8K. But at 25% with so many question marks, is his upside, because he does have upside, but is that worth 25% in DFS ownership wise? And no. If he was 10%, I'd say sure, like hammering, go way overweight on him. But there's just not I'm very data driven. There's not a lot of data that gives me security there. Does he have the upside? Of course he does. But there's not a lot of data that's driven by security. So if people are solely upside players, so they're likely then playing Max and they're might playing Mito, because those guys have 2 upsides based on their pricing. So yeah, I kind of get that. But for me, data driven, I want security within the numbers and try to find leverage with that, not so much on just a theory or belief of what upside could happen, because I firmly believe that we can kind of predict how a golfer with those 100 tournament simulations. That's what I'm trying to say, that we can kind of predict on a somewhat accurate level how a golfer may finish, like a win, a top 10 and 25th. And we don't know which week we're going to get out of those 100 simulations, but right. So Linus, you said refresh your browser because you just ran an ownership update. Oh, there we go. So I got to do this right now real quick because I want to see who he had. And especially the first name I'm going to, what Mike just posted, the first name I'm going to is Homa, to see where he's at right now. Oh, I gotta make the draft game up here. So bear with me. I appreciate you, Mike. I appreciate you letting me know. So first of all, what we do notice is Mike just updated Rom to 28. That's closer to what I thought he'd be. I still think he's going to be 40% and some single entry in the smaller tournaments, but 28% is what I thought. He also bumped Webb up to 22, but I'm going to go down to Homa. Yeah, so this is what we thought, guys. This is what we thought. Max Homa now up to 11, almost 12% if you round up. That's what the industry is more sounding like. That's still, I think, if Mike, if you ran one more tomorrow morning before, I think Max gets even higher, because 12% is not bad on him, but he's definitely trending upwards, as Mike was shown in on FanShare. His ownership is trending up. So if there's like one more run, and maybe Mike, you could speak to this, Max may be even higher, especially on Twitter. Everyone's posting who they like, and so that's great. So what we thought happened, Jaeger went up a little bit. Mito went down a little bit, 23% right now. But we're going to come to my favorite golfer, and my favorite golfer this week, and that's Taylor Gooch. You all know that. And look, I'm not a Gooch homer. I'm not like a fan. I mean, he seems like a cool guy, but it's almost like I was saying on my Monday show with Drew. It's almost like a stock with Gooch. He is very talented, especially talented with the irons and the kind of wedges. Within the last 36 and 24th, he ranks like some of the best in the field from proximity, the 100, the 124th, and especially kind of the more recent. Now, if you get into the 50, Gooch kind of goes back in the rankings from that proximity 100 to 125, but he fits very, very well here, and he's 11th off the approach in the last, let's say, rounds do I have? Yeah, 36. When you go to 24, he goes even higher. But one thing with Gooch is that holds him back, and I say it all the time, is the off the tee. And so at this course, yeah, the fairways are going to be tighter, but I saw and through the research is that green regulation from the rough is one of the highest on tour, maybe the highest. And so Mike is right. The big news is that ROM bug. And I wish that came out. If you were on the show earlier, I wish that came out yet tomorrow, because I'm a fade of ROM. And so Matt, you're saying Homa week. Oh, so they're Jers. You're saying Homa week. He has a great upside, and he's a great bet. He's a great bet, but often in DFS, great bets do not mean great DFS plays. And I don't think he is a great DFS play, because I'll be willing to bet that if Mike did another, I don't think you are, Mike, but if you did another run of your ownership, Homa would spike up just an even more. But yeah, he's a great bet. Bet him outright. That's great. But he's not. I don't think he's a good DFS play. I didn't even bet him outright. I don't like him here at this course fit. But let's go to Homa on FanShare and see his course form. Let's just see, or course sustainability. And Max is 77th. So that's not good. So that just proves almost that this is not a Max Homa course. And so this course sustainability ranking, that's something that FanShare has on FanShare Pro. It's really great. And he doesn't have good course history. He doesn't have not so good current form. Yeah, I don't like Homa this week, but he does have great upside. Does have excellent upside. So let's just come down to the board a little bit. Come finishing up with Taylor Gooch. Just like I said, is that he struggles. His weakness is maybe off the tee, but even if you're in the rough, this is a high course where you get green regulation from the rough. It's not very, penalizing. Stroke chain around the green isn't really important here that much. We want a guy that can kill it it's a second shot golf course. Who can kill it with the second shot is Taylor Gooch. And in DFS right now, Mike has him at 7% owned. Give me that at 8K. I personally feel like he's talented, almost in the range of Max Homa, and so he's really undervalued right now. So big on Max Homa. Gim, speaking of Gim, I'm surprised to see him at 17%. That's a lot for the Gim Reaper, for a guy that will kill you in many ways. But I'm not going to knock it. What I am worried about is a guy I really love after him, and that's Pat Perez. Love Pat Perez. He's about 18% right now. A little worried. Just of that, but Pat Perez fits really, really well here. Doesn't really drive it well, but drives it great. Hits it well on approach, decently with the proximity with those wedges. awesome and so surprising is how great he is on the strokes gained on par five. So be a big Perez guy. I like Perez a lot. And I know we're taking a lot of your time, but I'm going to go down to more in the 7K range, in the 6K, because that's where I feel like I'm living this week. Living this week because first there's so many unknowns, like the guys from the Corn Ferry Tour, and so the salaries are all bad. Except for the top guys, they're all bad because DraftKings doesn't know. They're just assigning a salary based on what they think a golfer is. But we haven't seen some of these golfers at all, unless you've been following the Corn Ferry Tour. So no one has talked much about leaving salary on the table. This is a great, if you follow golf and you're a fan, and you know a lot about the Corn Ferry Tour, and can kind of get information from there. Yeah, these guys are underpriced, but sometimes we think, gosh, if I'm leaving salary on the table, I'm not, optimizing my lineup, which it doesn't make, who's like, what model, what projections are you using? Your own. And so it just leave some salary on the table. Always go with your insight more than anyone else, really. So let's say kind of Jers has something. So Holman did not model out. Well, West Coast Poa, yeah, I can't argue with that. He grew up on the West Coast. He's an LA kid. I think went to Cal. So not argue that. But so yeah, bet him. I bet him don't play him in DFS. Bet him and don't play in DFS. But let's get back to this fun range. This is where we're living. And so I want to say Fratelli, I tweeted about him earlier. He's just awesome. So first, Fratelli's driving distance is sneaky good. And didn't he, I think in the fall, had a top 5 or top 10 at the Masters. He finished top 5 at the Open. So very talented, can smoke it off the tee. But he's 11th in the last 36 rounds from proximity to 100 to 125. And he's proximity within, because if he hits it farther, he's going to have less of a club in. So let's say we do proximity from 75 to 100. Well, he ranks 21st in the field. So you're talking about a guy, he's like the Cameron Champ maybe of this tournament last year. The guy that can smoke it off the tee, can kind of, when Champ is on, he can hit his wedge well. We saw that in Minnesota. At 7,500, Fratelli is just stupid. He should not be that low. I dare to say I like Fratelli more than Gooch, and I do. And Fratelli's 6%, 6% in DraftKings. And speaking of course history, Fanshare has him in the green with the fire because I think he finished 10th and 25th in his last 2 appearances here. So he has some of the best course history. I can't believe he's going on at 6% at his price at 7,500. Dylan Fratelli, a guy who's finished, top 10 in the last 6 majors. So man, not to say, yeah, twice in the last 6 majors, I should say. Yeah, he would not be 75 if he finished on all 6 majors. So coming down a little bit, Pat Kazire, he has that Gooch factor, a guy that can spray it off the tee. If you follow, Shot Link on the PGA Tour app, Kazire's always in the lake, or he's in a parking garage, or he's on a parking lot. He struggles off the tee, but what he can do really, really well is putt it and hit it well with some wedges. And so I really like Kazire. Fanshare has him at 10%, so bumped there. And then as we come down, Lanto, some people have been mentioning him. Joseph Bramlett is at almost 4%. Really surprised to see that. He's a Stanford boy out west. He can kind of smoke it off the tee to hit it close with his wedges. He's not like excellent with it, but he's good enough to have a good week. So yeah, I like Bramlett. Luke List is interesting too. Another guy who can usually kind of hit it well with his irons, but not so great with the wedges, but can smoke it. But look out for Russell Knox too. He's not very long, but gosh, he ranks 5th in the field in approach. He ranks 4th from that very important statistic of 100 to 125. And he also ranks 4th in 125 to 150. So unlike Fratelli, who may have 75 to 100 in a little bit more, because Knox isn't as long, he probably will have 125 to 150 and more. But the good thing in that, he ranks 4th in the field. So Knox is a really, really sneaky play. Really like Russell Knox. I think I have him in maybe 20%. So he's in the top, he's in the top 20 of or top 10 of my highest owned guys. Really like Russell. A lot of love for Pat Rogers. Frankly, I mean, if he's going to do well, this is the course he's going to do well. But man, it's hard to buy in the Rogers with some of the statistics. But I will say for Pat, Rogers' benefit, Pat never models out well. Unless it's like they're playing in Bermuda or something, he tends to do well that coastal course. But he never models out well, and he doesn't this week. He's ranked 135th from proximity to 100 to 125. Again, we know how important that stat is. And he's just bad with all the wedges, frankly. Now he's great. He can smash it. He has great driving distance. He's pretty good off the tee. But this is his best surface. He's out on the West Coast, so if he can kind of get something right with the wedges, he could have a good week. But let's see what Fanshare has his ownership at. And by the way, I don't think I mentioned Russell Knox's 4. So Fanshare has him at 8. So 8's not bad. 8's not bad, excuse me, with Rogers. But yeah, I'm just not buying into that. There's other guys around here that I want to play. And speaking of, I'm going to go all the way down because I know we're running a little bit out of time and don't want to keep you guys. But I mentioned Nick Watney in several different ways on Twitter and on my other show. And so Nick Watney's long-term stats are not going to pop out to you. But if you're playing a guy like Rahm, you're going to need to fit him in the salary saver. And Nick Watney is almost minimum price, 6,100. He's coming in on approach and some ball striking stats, some of the best in the field, looking at through the end of last season. And so his longer term stats around 63 rounds that we're looking, or 36 rounds, excuse me. Yeah, his wedges aren't great. He's actually pretty decent at 75 to 100. When I say decent, he's about middle of the field. But I love where he's trending, because when we're looking at guys who are very inconsistent and maybe just flat out bad, like the guys in the lower 6K range, we can play them sometimes weak if we're getting a nice little quick peek with the ball striking stats. That's how we can kind of identify those, huge long shots that maybe get a top 10 or maybe even win one league. So, like Chesson Hadley in Carolina last year he was less than 1% owned. I had him in a ton of lineups. He, lost it on the back on Sunday, but I identified his peak that week because of the ball striking trend. And I know we haven't played in a few weeks, or Nick hasn't, but Nick has showed a little bit of that. And at 6,100, it's okay to throw in a few little, ownership shares of them in your pool. And if you're trying to fit them in with Rahm, I kind of like that. So look out for Nick Watney this week. Bid Nick Watney. So Chesson Hadley. So Coach talked about is mentioning Chesson Hadley. This course fits him. Chesson Hadley can kind of, if he gets it rolling like it did in Carolina and South Carolina at the Palmetto, he can have it great because he does hit it well. Let's pull up his stats on with the wedges and see what he is at. Yeah, so in middle of the road, I think if we ran this model with some lesser rounds, like 25th, so more frequently, he would do a lot better. But he's middle of the road or just a little bit better, so that's great. Cheston's never going to pop on these models, but based on everything about his game, maybe his strength is with the wedges. And again, that's not great, but it's one of the better statistics that he does have that I'm looking at. So if his strength fires, this is a course fit. Let's just see maybe through on Fanshare his course sustainability ranking, what that might be, to see if he's a good fit, because Chesson could go very under the radar, much like at Palmetto. And frankly, this is a pretty similar course. So let's see here. I don't know why this isn't loaded. There we go. So he's projected 2% owned. Oh, well, the good thing is he's about 49th in course sustainability ranking, and course fit too. He's pretty well. So that's pretty nice for Chesson. And at 7K, I'm a little surprised he's that expensive. But he's a good play, especially at 2%. Chesson Hadley is a good play. Well, if there's nothing else, that's what we're leaving you with. Again, don't be afraid to leave salary on the table. Don't be afraid to, again, hopefully not, focus on process over the content. So again, content is just your weekly results, because what really derails players is after a tournament happens, we think, okay, what did I get right? What did I get wrong? And when I got wrong, I have to change it up because I don't want to make that mistake again. And in DFS, you don't have to do something wrong to have a good week. You can actually do something right, on every sort of way and have a losing week. So that's why we really want to focus more on your process. Likely, if you're listening to this show and if you're on Twitter or whatever, you're really, really good at what you do. You're great at picking golfers. And so trust yourself. What really makes DFS tricky is if you don't trust yourself and fear gets in, and then you kind of keep changing up your strategy and you're just inconsistent, and inconsistent to make you vulnerable. It gives your games holes, and we don't want that. So trust yourself. You guys are good at what you do. I appreciate y'all. Welcome back to the season. I'm excited to be doing this and appreciate Jers very much so. Much love, respect, bless up. Do something you want to do. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you next week. Good luck, this guys. Oh, Coach, I will say, you want to talk about cash plays? I'll give you some cash plays. Rom is a cash play. We'll see how his stomach is tomorrow. But of course, Rom's a cash play. Hoffman Perez is a cash play. If I had to give you one guy down below, I didn't mention Doc. Like Doc, he's not a cash game play. But let's just find you one lower guy who could be a cash game. I'll give you a cash game play because of his what I talked about earlier, be his course history, how he's a course fit, and that's Fratelli. Fratelli, I would lock him in cash play. So, Coach, appreciate you. You guys take care. We'll see you tomorrow. Let's stay in touch and let's have a good week.